So every morning you flip on the bathroom light and you look in the mirror. And you're probably just checking to see if like your hair is cooperating or if you look overly tired or, if that new wrinkle was there yesterday.
Right, mostly surface level stuff.
Exactly. But according to the clinical texts of this incredibly sophisticated, centuries-old medical system, you aren't just looking at your face. You're actually looking at this real-time, high-definition diagnostic broadcast of your liver, your heart, and your kidneys.
It really is wild. It completely reframes our relationship with our own anatomy, honestly, because, we're so conditioned by modern medicine to think that health is this opaque, locked box.
Yes.
Like it's something completely hidden away that requires, I don't know, a specialized machine or a blood draw or an MRI to crack open and decipher.
Right, we just assume the surface of the body is just packaging. But for this deep dive, we're exploring the clinical texts of Chinese medical diagnosis by observation. So we're looking at sources that teach practitioners how to, read the body's external signs to really understand its internal health.
Which is such a fascinating shift in perspective.
It really is. And the foundational principle here comes from the classic medical text of the Master of Danxi, which states very simply, and I love this, the outer reflects the inner.
Yeah, and it's important to contextualize this too. In Chinese medicine, there are actually 4 inseparable diagnostic pillars. So there's auscultation and olfaction, which is basically listening to the breath and voice, and smelling.
Right.
Then there's inquiring, which is, taking a really detailed patient history. There's palpation, so feeling the pulse in the abdomen. And finally, inspection or observation.
And our focus today is strictly on that visual observation.
Exactly. Just how the body broadcasts its status for anyone who knows how to look.
So if we're going to rely on observation instead of, say, an X-ray, we really need to understand the mechanism here. Because, looking at a tired face and assuming the person is tired is just common sense.
Right. Anybody can do that.
Yeah. But these texts claim you can look at the face and know the precise state of the spleen. So is there an actual, structural mechanism at play here? Or are practitioners just making highly educated guesses based on someone looking a bit unwell?
Oh, it's far more systematic than an educated guess. There's this really brilliant clinical analogy from Dr. J.H.F. Shen that perfectly illustrates the difference in methodology here.
I really like this part.
Yeah, it's great. He argued that Western medicine is kind of like needing to look inside the houses to appraise a neighborhood. You use endoscopies, MRIs, and biopsies to basically break down the doors and see exactly what furniture is in the living room.
Like getting right in there.
Exactly. Chinese medicine, on the other hand, just drives through the neighborhood. Right. By observing the state of the lawns, the paint peeling on the siding, the type of activity in the streets, you can get a highly accurate gauge of the socioeconomic status of that neighborhood without ever once turning a doorknob.
Okay, so the external environment is basically a reliable proxy for the internal one.
Exactly.
It actually reminds me of fractals in mathematics, like the idea that a complex structure replicates itself at every single scale. If you zoom in on a snowflake, the tiny branches look exactly like the whole snowflake.
Yeah.
So does the body actually map its whole structure in miniature on its surface?
It absolutely does, yeah. And the clinical term for this is a microsystem. The text really emphasized that the biological system is continuously echoing itself, like the part and the whole are in total resonance.
That's so cool.
According to this foundational text, The Simple Questions, the face is actually mapped directly to the internal organs. So the heart status is reflected at the forehead,
Okay.
the spleen is reflected at the nose, the lungs show up on the right cheek, the liver on the left, and the kidneys correspond down at the chin.
So wait, are these readouts static? Or do they fluctuate depending on what you just ate or how you slept? Because if my nose represents my spleen, what happens to my nose when my spleen is struggling?
Oh, they fluctuate constantly based on your physiological state. It's very dynamic. So the color, the moisture, the swelling in those specific zones, they are real-time indicators. And this isn't just isolated to the face either.
Really?
Yeah, the ear is mapped like an upside-down fetus containing points that correspond to every single organ. And in 1973, there was a researcher named Zhang Yingqing who discovered that the side of the second metacarpal bone,
Which is it where?
oh, it's the bone in your hand just below your index finger, he found it contains a miniature linear map of the entire body.
You're kidding. On one bone.
Just one bone. A practitioner can actually press along that single bone and find tenderness that corresponds exactly to an issue in the stomach or, say, the lower back.
That is incredible. But If the body is covered in these localized dashboards, it seems like it would be super overwhelming. I mean, you wouldn't just zoom in on the second metacarpal bone the second someone walks into a room.
Yeah.
There has to be a starting point, right? A way to assess the whole neighborhood
Yeah.
before you start looking at individual lawns.
Right. You need the big picture first.
Mhm.
And the very first thing a practitioner evaluates isn't a specific coordinate at all. It is the overall vitality of the terrain.
Okay.
In the texts, this is called assessing the spirit, or Shen.
I want to pause on the word spirit real quick because to a modern ear, that sounds a bit like an aura reading. It sounds mystical, like we're looking for a ghost floating around the patient or something.
Yeah, people get hung up on that translation.
Right, but reading the sources, the clinical application is actually highly physical.
It is entirely physiological. In this medical context, spirit is simply the outward manifestation of the relative strength of the body's qi and blood.
So it's measurable.
Exactly. It's an objective metric of vitality. You observe it in the sparkle of the eyes, the rhythm of the breathing, the clarity of the mind, and the vibrancy of the complexion. It basically tells you if the body has the fundamental resources to fight off disease.
So it's kind of like the difference between a high-definition 4K television and an old standard definition tube TV.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
Like, two people can have the exact same facial structure, the same skin tone, but one has this undeniable HD glow while the other just looks flat. But how do you actually standardize a glow in a medical textbook?
Right. It sounds subjective, but the sources define a normal, healthy face with 4 very distinct physical characteristics. First, it must have luster, which physically shows that the spirit is intact and the organs are functioning.
Okay, luster.
Second, it needs a subtle reddish hue.
I'm assuming that reddish hue indicates blood flow, like good circulation.
Specifically, it indicates a strong supply of heart blood, and that's regardless of the person's baseline skin tone.
Got it.
Third, it must have moisture. And this isn't about having oily skin, to be clear. It physically indicates that your stomach qi is robust and that it's distributing internal fluids properly.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. And the fourth characteristic is probably the most clinically profound one. The color must be contained or veiled.
Veiled, like wearing a piece of fabric. What does that actually look like on human skin?
Yeah, the texts describe it as looking like there is a thin white silk veil draped over the underlying color.
Huh.
Physiologically, it means the color shouldn't look raw or exposed or like it's floating right on the absolute surface of the epidermis. It should look grounded, deeply integrated into the tissue.
Oh, I think I know what you mean, like it has depth.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The complexion is considered the flag of the spirit, and the deep yin organs, like the kidneys and the liver, those are the residences of that spirit. So when those internal organs are healthy, they anchor the energy deep in the body, which creates that beautiful veiled look.
And what happens if they aren't healthy?
Well, if the internal yin organs are completely exhausted, they can't anchor that energy anymore. So the veil drops, the energy floats to the surface and burns out, and the complexion becomes dark, dull, and entirely lusterless.
Okay, so if the spirit tells us the power is on and the TV is actually working, the next step is figuring out what the default picture settings are. Because, my baseline normal is not going to be the same as your baseline normal.
Definitely not.
And a practitioner can't diagnose a deviation without establishing what kind of machine they're looking at in the first place.
Precisely. And this brings us to the observation of constitutional traits, specifically the 5-element body types: wood, fire, earth, metal, and water. Everyone has a baseline structural architecture.
Let's pick a few of these to contrast because it really highlights how wildly different these baselines are. Like, think of that coworker who power walks everywhere, talks super quickly, and just seems to run on this nervous energy all the time. That aligns perfectly with the fire type, right?
Yes, exactly. The text described fire types as having a pointed, slightly smaller head, perhaps curly or scanty hair, and a naturally reddish hue. They are energetic, active, fast-moving, though they can be prone to short tempers.
Naturally.
Yeah, their natural state is highly dynamic.
Now, contrast that with the earth type. The sources describe them as having a rounder face, a larger head, and strong, well-developed thigh and calf muscles. They are physically grounded.
Very sturdy.
Yeah, and personality-wise, they are calm, generous, steady, and unhurried.
And then you have the wood type, which is characterized by a tall, sinewy body, broad shoulders, a straight back, and a slightly greenish hue. They're highly intelligent, but very prone to overthinking, worrying, and basically driving themselves to exhaustion.
So a skeptic might look at all this and say, okay, we're just doing medical astrology here. We're sorting people into personality houses like Harry Potter. How does knowing someone is a fire type or an earth type actually dictate how a practitioner treats a physical illness?
It's a fair question, but it's really because it is a highly accurate tool for prognosis and identifying early warning signs. The typing isn't about boxing someone into a cute personality trait. It's about defining their personal parameters for health.
Okay.
Let's stick with that fire type. A fire type is supposed to walk fast. If they're moving quickly, their internal system is operating within its normal, healthy parameters. But if an earth type, who is naturally supposed to move deliberately and steadily, starts walking really fast and erratically, that is a clinical warning sign that their internal balance has been severely disrupted.
So the trait itself isn't a pathology. It's the friction between the trait and the person's baseline.
Precisely. And it goes both ways. If that fire type suddenly starts walking very slowly and lethargically, that tiny discrepancy is a massive red flag. Their core energy is failing.
Wow.
Yeah, the texts warn that a deviation from your elemental baseline in even one small detail can herald a sudden, serious pathology. Furthermore, it actually dictates how dangerous a disease is. It's much safer to have an illness that matches your own element.
Wait, how so?
Well, if a wood type has a liver disharmony and the liver corresponds to wood, the prognosis is relatively good because the illness is operating within the body's natural elemental terrain.
The body kind of speaks that language.
Exactly. The body knows how to process it. But if a wood type suffers from a severe fire disharmony, the prognosis is much worse. It's a cross-element illness. It's literally like a forest fire burning through the wood. The structure just isn't built to handle that specific type of systemic stress.
That makes so much sense. Okay, so if we know the baseline canvas, we can spot when the paint starts to change. The clinical text outlined 5 specific pathological colors that manifest on the skin. But before we get into what red or yellow means, I have to bring up the obvious modern question here.
Go for it.
We live in a world with incredibly diverse natural skin tones. If a textbook says a practitioner should look for a white or black or yellow discoloration, how does that apply universally across different ethnicities and melanin levels?
It is a crucial distinction to make, and the texts are actually quite clear that observation is not about looking at the absolute color of the epidermis. It is about assessing the underlying hue and the luster.
The hue.
Yeah,
Right.
it's about how the color presents in the living tissue. You aren't looking for like a hex code paint match. You're looking at the quality of the light reflecting off the skin. Is the color deep inside the tissue or is it floating on the surface? Is it distinct or obscure?
So if we take someone with a naturally deep complexion, we aren't saying their skin turns literally bright yellow. We're looking for a yellowish hue or maybe a specific dullness radiating through their natural skin tone.
Exactly. Let's actually look at what yellow signifies. It points to dampness or spleen deficiency. In Chinese medicine, the spleen is responsible for digestion and the transformation of fluids. So when the spleen is weak, it can't process fluids properly, so those fluids accumulate and stagnate.
And this is what they call dampness.
Right.
But how does stagnant fluid physically manifest as, like, yellowing tissue?
Because the stagnation creates an unnatural buildup of metabolic waste that the body just can't clear, which alters the hue of the skin. But the specific shade of yellow tells you exactly what kind of dampness you're dealing with.
Okay, break that down for me.
Well, a bright orange-yellow hue indicates a yang jaundice driven by damp heat. The heat is basically pushing the dampness outward, making it look bright. But a smoky, dark, hazy yellow indicates yin jaundice, which is caused by cold damp. The cold causes the fluids to freeze up and become really murky.
Interesting. I get how yellow connects to fluid buildup, and red is fairly intuitive, right? Like,
Yeah.
we all flush when we have a fever or we're overheated. But the texts also talk about black as a pathological color.
Yes, they do.
And I typically associate black tissue with, I don't know, necrosis or frostbite, not a general internal imbalance. What does a black hue indicate?
A deeply dark, blackish, or gray hue indicates severe kidney disease or extreme cold and pain. The kidneys are the root of the body's yin and yang-like, the core, water, and fire. But again, the moisture of the skin is the deciding factor in the diagnosis here.
How so?
If a practitioner observes a dark, blackish hue but the skin looks moist, it indicates a cold syndrome. The kidney's fire is weak, so cold is dominating, but the fluids are still intact.
But what if that dark hue looks completely dried out?
Ah, well, if it looks dried up and burned out, it indicates empty heat from a kidney yin deficiency.
Empty heat.
Yeah, the kidney's yin, which is the cooling, moistening aspect of the body, has completely dried up. So without that cooling fluid, the residual yang energy creates a false destructive heat that literally scorches the internal environment. And that creates that dry, burned out black hue on the surface.
Wow, so the color tells you what's happening to the engine, basically.
Right.
But the body also has to move through space. Color is just the paint job. The texts dive really deeply into posture, tissues, and the unconscious habits of movement, too.
Yeah, tissues are essentially external monitors for specific internal organs. The text mapped this out really clearly. The sinews and tendons reflect the liver.
Right.
The blood vessels reflect the heart. The muscles reflect the spleen. The skin reflects the lungs. And the bones reflect the kidneys.
Meaning, if you see an issue in the physical structure, you aren't just treating the localized area. Like, if someone is losing their hair or it's becoming incredibly brittle, a practitioner isn't just looking at the scalp.
Right, not at all. The thickness and luster of the hair depend heavily on liver blood. The liver stores the blood, and the hair is considered the extension of that blood. So, dull, falling hair indicates that the liver is failing to produce or store enough blood to nourish the extremities.
What about gray hair?
Well, premature graying indicates a decline in kidney essence, which is the deeper foundational genetic material of the body.
And posture tells a story too, doesn't it? Or that a huge barrel-like chest isn't just, broad shoulders. The texts say it indicates an excess condition of the lungs or stomach.
That's right.
Or like someone with unusually large upper thighs out of proportion with their body, that points to spleen deficiency. Because the spleen governs the muscles and struggles to transport fluids upward, leaving them to just pool in the lower body.
Exactly. And then you really have to observe how that body moves. Movement is fundamentally categorized by yin and yang. Quick, jerky movements, or someone who kicks off all their bedclothes at night, is exhibiting excess yang in heat.
Ah.
The body is literally trying to vent that thermal energy through motion and exposure.
So think about the person in the conference room who just cannot stop bouncing their leg under the table.
Oh, yeah.
It's a completely unconscious habit, and most of us just assume they've had way too much coffee.
But that specific continuous fidgeting, especially in the legs, points directly to what we mentioned earlier, empty heat of the kidneys.
Wait, really?
Yeah.
How does a kidney imbalance cause your leg to bounce?
Well, remember that the kidneys control the lower half of the body, and they balance water, which is yin, and fire, which is yang.
Right.
If the kidney yin is deficient, if the cooling water is low, the yang fire isn't kept in check, so it creates this restless, simmering heat in the lower body. The body unconsciously attempts to burn off or express that trapped, agitated energy through physical motion.
That is wild.
Yeah, the leg bouncing is literally a mechanical release valve for empty heat.
What about more severe movements, like a pronounced eye twitch or maybe a hand tremor?
If the movements are larger, like tremors, tics, or convulsions, the texts classify that as internal liver wind.
Liver wind.
Right, because the liver governs the sinews. When liver blood is severely deficient, it creates a void in the blood vessels. And in Chinese medical theory, wind rushes in to fill that void. That internal wind creates involuntary shaking in the sinews.
So it's like a structural draft.
Essentially, yes. And the clinical texts are so precise that they even prescribe specific interventions based on this single observation. To treat and nourish all the sinews in the body and extinguish that wind, practitioners use a very specific acupuncture point called GB34 Youngling Horn.
Where's that?
It's located just below the knee. The visual observation of the tremor leads directly to the physical mechanism of repair.
We have covered an immense amount of ground here. I mean, we started by driving through the neighborhood of the body, using Dr. Shen's analogy to look at the outward signs of internal health.
We did.
We learned to check the spirit in the windows to see if the lights were on and the TV was broadcasting in HD.
Yeah.
We identified the foundational 5-element architecture of the houses, whether they are built for speed like fire or endurance like earth. And we decoded the underlying hues, the tissues, and even the unconscious fidgets that tell the story of what's happening in the plumbing and wiring inside.
It creates a framework where the body is no longer this total mystery. It's constantly communicating its needs long before a disease fully manifests.
And that is the ultimate takeaway for you listening. Tomorrow morning, when you look in the mirror, don't just do a cosmetic check. Look at the luster of your skin. Notice if your complexion has lost its veil, and looks raw or exhausted. Notice if you were suddenly bouncing your leg during a meeting when you usually sit totally still.
Yeah.
You shouldn't try to self-diagnose a severe illness based on a shadow, but paying attention to these microscopic shifts gives you an incredible early warning system. You can literally catch the whispers before they become shouts.
That's beautifully said. And as we wrap up, there is one final profound concept embedded in these texts that stretches this entire diagnostic framework to its absolute limit.
Oh, do tell.
The clinical sources briefly mention that Chinese diagnosis relies on a fundamental resonance between the microcosm and the macrocosm.
Okay, so the idea that the part reflects the whole, but scaled up to the environment itself.
Exactly. If a single bone in your hand is a perfect map of your entire body and your external face is a perfect real-time mirror of your internal organs,
Right.
and your internal organs are a direct biological mirror of the natural elements, wood, fire, earth, metal, water, then our physical health is structurally tied to the planetary ecosystem.
Wow. That reframes absolutely everything. Because if the resonance never stops scaling upward, then our individual bodies might just be the external face, the observable complexion of the Earth's internal health.
Exactly. Diagnosing ourselves is, in a very real way, taking the pulse of the environment we live in. We are just another microsystem.
Well, so tomorrow, when you flip on that light, take a closer look. Look past the surface. Because that reflection isn't just a face, it's a map, it's a neighborhood. And it might just be the whole world looking back.